Please resume your seat. Senator Canavan.
I thank Senator Sterle very much for that, Dorothy Dixer. I will have about 10 minutes to explain why net zero emissions would be a very bad deal for our nation's farmers and especially for our rural communities. And those conclusions that I make are just from very simple calculations and estimates from bodies like the CSIRO and other respected economic modelling. I want to start, though, by the fact that often with these motions, when there is a quote from somebody, you could almost guarantee that that's a misleading quote, or at least a quote which a lot of detail has been left off. And I know that in this case because while the motion identifies the culprit as Barnaby Joyce with this quote, in fact the words were jointly authored by myself and Barnaby in an opinion piece in February this year in The Australian, where we did say the Nationals have always been against a net zero emissions target, we've always been against, stress, and we could not credibly represent farmers if we were to adopt such a target. The paragraph just preceding that quote, which wasn't included in the motion for reasons that will become obvious, the paragraph before that said in our opinion piece, "The problem is that cows and sheep have a tendency to burp and fart large amounts of methane, a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Every cow emits about 2,300 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent gases a year." The CSIRO estimated last year that to reach net zero emissions, we would need to start with a carbon price of $30 a tonne now. Even a relatively small cattle producer runs about 1,000 head, so they would be up for a $70,000 a year cost under a net zero policy. Now, those that do advocate for net zero emissions do so quite often quite glibly. There's a lot of hand-waving. It's going to great benefits. There's going to be lots of jobs. There's not a lot of detail about exactly what net zero emissions mean or how we're going to get there, but it's all going to be fantastic, just believe me. It is the pitch from those pushing net zero emissions is the policy equivalent of the steak knife salesman on late-night TV. There's always more. There's always more. It's always fantastic. It's so good. It's so good it can hardly be true, because it's not true. It's not true. Those figures I just quoted, they're just the facts. How will farmers pay the 2.3 tonnes per head per year that their cows emit right now? How will they pay for that? Because what we didn't quote in that op-ed is actually the CSIRO and their modelling. It starts at $30 a tonne. It grows to $250 a tonne by the end of 2050. So Senator Sterle over there spent 10 minutes talking, "Oh, we'll get to net zero emissions by 2050. NFF says it's fine, it's fine. I don't think he knows these things. He doesn't know. He said he wasn't a farmer. He doesn't know how much a cow emits. He doesn't know the fact that if you're going to charge someone over $200 a tonne for the methane that comes out the front end of a cow, you're then going to be up for that 1,000 a head cattle farmer. They'll be up for $400,000 a year. $400,000 a year. What are they going to do? What are they going to do, Senator Sterle? How's that going to work? Who's going to pay for that? Well, it will be paid for at the self-service checkout at Woolies. When you go there and swipe your rump steak and it comes up, you'll have to put your PIN in. You'll have to put your PIN in because it's going to be over $100. It's going to be over $100. Every shop will be over $100, and you won't be getting any free transaction approved. That's what will happen to Australian consumers if this comes off on the CSIRO's own figures. They're the CSIRO's figures. And look, worse than this. That's the impact on farming. But of course, such a policy to get rid of emissions from our economy, from our coal industries, from our gas industries, from our factories, which we want to get more back, we want to get manufacturing back, don't we? They're all going to be paying for it. And there's been absolutely no detailed economic modelling put before the Australian people about those costs. The CSIRO did some costs on what the carbon prices would be, but not on a proper modelling on what the impact on jobs, what the impact on wages would be to the Australian economy. In fairness, the New Zealand government did do such modelling. They did computable general equilibrium modelling, which has its flaws, but it gives you a broad estimate. They did some modelling on what it would mean to the New Zealand economy if they were to reach net zero emissions by 2050. They made some pretty outlandish assumptions about some technology being able to halve methane emissions from sheep and electric. I think all the electric vehicle fleet, half the freight fleet was going to be electric. But anyway, they made some pretty generous assumptions. But even with those assumptions in the modelling, their modelling showed that by 2050 the New Zealand economy would be 10 to 20% smaller. 10 to 20% smaller, a fifth potentially smaller than today. That there would be a 2 to 4% loss of jobs in New Zealand as a result of net zero emissions. Now, if you translate that to Australia, for 4% loss in employment in Australia, that would be 400,000 people. So before we just glibly roll off the talking points that all of you get in your morning inbox that net zero emissions is going to create jobs, are going to be great, just remember that the respectable, detailed modelling that's been done would show that 500,000 odd Australians would lose their jobs. Now, after that modelling, guess what? After that modelling was conducted, the New Zealand government exempted agriculture from their target. And in New Zealand, half their emissions come from agriculture. So their net zero emissions target is literally half pregnant. Half of it doesn't even exist because they're not even going to try and reduce emissions in half their economy. Yeah. I mean, this is why this is all a marketing pitch, not real. It's not pragmatic. And if there's one thing I know about people in the bush and the country is they hate people with spin. They can see through this. They can see through this from a million miles away. This is all, and you're better than this, Senator Subsell, you're much better than this. This is all slick marketing spin from corporate offices in Sydney because the people that will make money out of net zero emissions, the people that really make money, will be those bankers in Sydney. They're loving it. They're loving it. Why did the Australian Financial Review have 5 stories on Tuesday morning bemoaning the fact that Barnaby Joyce was back, bemoaning the fact that net zero emissions might not come in? Why would the Financial Review be upset about that? Because our financial executives stand to make a lot of money out of net zero emissions, because you have to define net zero, you have to create certificates, you have to trade them, and that's where the bankers make a lot of money. Good luck to them. It's a career. It's a career. But that's not what I want for our country. What I want for our country is that we bring back manufacturing jobs in this country, that we stop getting ripped off by China and signing up to deals which they don't comply with. But we do. Because the other thing that other speakers here that contribute to this debate need to answer is if we do sign up to this, because the whole intent of this is to lower emissions across the world. I mean, it doesn't matter what we do so much, but I accept if the rest of the world's doing things, we've got to be a good contributor. But the whole point is for the rest of the world to act as well. It won't mean anything if they don't. If we can't answer this question, Senator Sterle put a question to the Senate, answer this question. If we can't trust China to comply and cooperate with the health inspectors investigating coronavirus, how do you think we can trust them to cooperate with the climate cops that will have to enforce any net zero emissions deal? Is that real? Are people really thinking that the Chinese Communist Party can be trusted when they say they're going to reduce emissions, going to achieve net zero emissions by 2060? Is that a real position that people are putting? Do you really believe the Chinese Communist Party when they say that? Do you really believe them when last year they installed 38 gigawatts of new coal-fired power stations last year in China? 38 gigawatts, double our coal fleet in 1 year. And then when they go to Davos, when Xi Jinping goes to Davos, he'll say, I'm subscribing to net zero emissions, and all these bankers who want to make money out of it, lap it up. Oh, how great! How great that China is come and seen the light. What a load of rot! What a load of rot! We have got to make sure we are not naive as a country right now. We cannot afford it. We cannot. Maybe in previous eras we could, but unfortunately, the next generation of Australians may face a tougher time of it than what we've all been growing accustomed to in our relative prosperous and peaceful era, because we can see the threats in our region, the aggression in our region, and we need to make sure we adopt policies as a country that are made here in Australia, not made in international agreements overseas for a class of people that want to make money off trading. We need to make policies in Australia here that will bring back manufacturing jobs to this country, that will make sure that we can be a country that can defend ourselves, support ourselves, and not be beholden to international agreements that are worked out in overseas capitals that betray the interests of the average working men and women of this country. That is what we need as a nation. And that is what I know Barnaby Joyce is focused on, the Nationals Party is focused on, because we will always put Australia first. In this chamber here, there are flags here that represent this country, Australia. And so in this chamber here, we should pass laws that represent that flag and this country, not the interests of those around the rest of the world.